Hello and welcome to That Nerd Thing, where we uncover the magical impact that fandoms have on our lives. My name is Morgan, and I am so beyond excited that for this first episode of That Nerd Thing, I have a guest that I have admired. She is so motivating and inspiring, and I am so honored that she is here today. So I would love to welcome Nicole from Fantasy Fangirls. Hi, Nicole.
Oh, that makes me so happy. You are just such a light in my life. Like, you really came into my email inbox very specifically, like guns a-blazing. And honestly, I love it. You just have such a presence, Morgan. And when you said that you were starting a podcast, I was like, that's perfect.
Oh my gosh.
So good.
So for those listening, I actually met Nicole through my other work as a psychologist. We were doing some other work on mindfulness and perfectionism, and she sent an email one day that she was doing a podcast, about Fantasy Fangirls, and I was like, oh my God. And it was amazing. I love fantasy. I love reading. I love books. I think I was actually on your other podcast and we were talking about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I remember after that podcast, I just started sitting and thinking, like, I want to do something nerdy. I want to kind of take a break from the therapy world and do something a little fun. And then I saw that email from you and I'm just like, are we in sync? This is so cool. So I'm so excited that you're here. So thank you. Thank you for being my first guest.
Oh, thank you for having me as your first guest. This is such an honor.
Awesome. So like I said in the intro episode, if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, I definitely recommend going and listening to learn a little bit more about the show. But I am going to be a major fangirl with all of my guests. So Nicole, I'm warning you, I am a major fan. So you might hear me just like squeeing over you for this entire recording.
Can we vice versa on that one? I love you. So that sounds perfect.
So let's go into the first segment, which I like to call exploring your nerdy identity. So Nicole, I have some rapid fire questions for you. Don't feel the need to, think too deeply about them. Just answer with whatever comes to mind. Got it?
Oh boy, I'm ready. I've got this.
What is the first nerdy thing that you ever did or became a fan of?
Oof. As a younger sibling, my big thing was I always wanted to be into what my older sister was into, and she was a diehard Harry Potter head. But I had a really hard time reading growing up, so I really went like full on into the movies. So I'd say my first nerd thing was Harry Potter movies. I've now read the books far too many times to count. But I would say the first thing that I stayed up late at night obsessing over was actually Twilight. I think that was my first thing.
That's amazing. I remember Twilight. I loved it. I think it was the first series that had midnight release parties after Harry Potter that I'm aware of. So I remember the movie releases, the books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. And I think it's kind of got like a little bit of a kind of nose up in the air around it now because of the way the movies went. There were some things in the books that I think that now reading I'd be like, ooh, like I don't know about that. But back then it was the first entrance to morally gray from a romantic character side of things that I just fell head over heels for Edward Cullen, let me tell you.
I know. Didn't we all?
We truly did.
What is your favorite nerdy thing?
I'm going to go genre because I truly cannot pick. So I'm going to go romantasy in a very cliche Fantasy Fangirls answer. But romantasy has completely stolen my heart. I mean, the fantasy and the romance happy merriment is just too good to be true. So I'm going to niche it down ever so slightly. And I'll say it's a perfect tie between ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses, the Empyrean series of Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, and I'm actually really, really, really falling head over heels for Crescent City right now. So I'm going to throw that Sarah J. Maas universe in there as well.
Yeah, I know. I've been seeing all your posts and I'm writing down all these books that I need to read, and I'm like, oh no, when am I going to have time for this?
It's so good. Yeah. I'm just doing the audiobook, so I don't really physically read. I have never been tested, but I'm pretty sure I have dyslexia, and it's really hard for me to sit down and read and just enjoy it. So I love the audiobooks, and those I just power through like crazy because I'll listen to them while I'm coloring or while I'm cooking dinner or while I'm laying in bed in the morning because I have no control anymore with these fandoms. So that has always been really, really fun. And I love especially the Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros. They pick really, really, really good audiobook narrators. So it makes it easy to to fall into the story.
Yeah, that's important. I got back into reading after taking a break because of audiobooks. It was just a great transition, and it feels the same to me. I'm still able to get immersed in the world. I love it.
I could not agree more. I totally couldn't agree more.
What is, well, I guess you sort of answered it, the current thing that you're nerdy about?
I'm gonna go Crescent City. I think I have to because I'm just so
Told you I was gonna fangirl.
Oh my God, that just warmed my heart so much. I think I have to go Crescent City, but I might go the whole Maas-verse in general. I'm simultaneously listening to A Court of Thorns and Roses with my husband, so I'm falling back into that world again, and it's just like I love Prithian. I love that. It's the thing that got me into this world, and it really has a special place in my heart. But man, oh man, Crescent City. Like I had no idea what this book series was about and started reading it, and I was like, whoa, like this is so different than anything I expected. And I think that's when it like really got a chokehold on me. And then obviously I can't ignore Iron Flame and Fourth Wing. They are the deepest love. And I mean, I'm literally wearing a Best Guy t-shirt right now. Like it like basically takes up about 90% of my headspace is that universe for sure.
Yeah. For those who are just listening, I recommend watching on YouTube, but I just held up from Fantasy Fangirls. They had, what is it? Just like a Christmas tree ornament, and it says OG Fantasy Fangirl with their logo. And I saw you have a new logo, by the way, which is beautiful. Everyone should go check that out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We wanted to have the OG logo on the Christmas ornament because there is such a special community that has sprung up around the OG fans. Like we've only been doing this for like 3.5 months, and the fandom has just gotten so tight knit. So we wanted to have something that really showed like, hey, you've been with us since the beginning. Thank you so much. And now we have this new logo, which we love so much, but it's also like bittersweet saying goodbye to the old one. So we wanted to have that as like a little representation.
What is the most underrated nerdy thing about you?
You know, I helped you create these questions, and I never really thought about my own answers. What is the most underrated nerdy thing? Underrated. What is the most underrated nerdy thing? Damn, that's a hard effing question.
I know. Maybe it's not such a rapid fire question.
This is a thinker. I don't know how much this is underrated. I think it's something I don't talk about very much, so I'll put it underrated in that category. I love video games. I really, really enjoy specifically like the Nintendo world of things, like Zelda, that stuff. I have probably logged on Breath of the Wild, which is the original Nintendo Switch Zelda game. I probably logged well over 1,000 hours on that game alone. I've probably come close to 700 hours on the sequel, Tears of the Kingdom. It's my happy place. I love, my husband and I have a tradition every Sunday morning where we make brunch and we play video games, but he loves watching video games, like almost like it's a TV show. And I don't. I like to be in the driver's seat, so it works out so perfectly. So I'd say like that's the most thing that, I don't know how underrated it is since it is such a huge part of my life and it is so popular, but I do think it's the thing that I don't talk about the most. So I'll throw that in there as that question.
Oh, that's so amazing. Maybe I'll have you on in the future to talk about video games.
Oh my God. It was for my other show. I had Julia Bianco Scheffling on the show, who is a video game casting director, casting producer. So she worked on Tears of the Kingdom and on Breath of the Wild. So getting to talk to her about what is it like casting the voice acting side from video games was fascinating, and she would be a great guest for you. Like great guest. I might see if I can get you guys in touch.
I love that. I'm just so excited on the show. Yeah, like you've helped me so much. I'm just so excited to talk to people about things that they love and learn about it, because even though this is like not a therapy show, I just can't help but want to learn everything about everyone and their passions. It's just so fun.
I love that. I love that so much. That makes me so happy.
And what is the most random nerdy thing about you?
Most random nerdy thing about me. I love merch. I'm wearing 2 pieces of it right now. Like I have no chill when it comes to merch. When it comes to random nerdy things, it brings me so much joy to be out in the wild and be wearing like a Spill the Tea with the Surreal t-shirt from Akatar, and someone be like, oh, like someone recognize it. Like that is just, it's an instant connector of people. And that alone, and it's so unique and weird and so wonderful. Like we've had people who've now been wearing Fantasy Fangirls merch out in the wild, and like they see someone who they know and that who also listens to the show. And that is just like the biggest hug I could ever receive ever in my life. But I'd say wearing merch and then connecting with other people over it is just such a niche thing. But I think that that's such a beautiful, like you and I have talked about this, that's such a beautiful thing about the nerd quote unquote community is there is so much passion that whenever you do see someone who is obsessed with the same thing you are, it's like you're instant best friends.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important.
Yeah. I think that's a great transition into the next sort of segment of the show, which is talking about our journey into the fandom. And I think today we're going to focus a little bit more on the book world and, you know, your podcast and your journey there. So do you want to share like what? So like a few months ago, you started this podcast with Lexi to talk about something that you're passionate about, and it blew up. And it's a very good podcast, by the way. It blew up for a reason.
Thank you.
What has that been like for you, this journey into this fandom world?
I think I have to almost start at the very beginning for this. So I got married this summer, and this thing happens when you get married, and it is all your free time goes to wedding planning. And my husband and I were very adamant about planning it together. So we had no spare time in our lives. And prior to this, I was audiobook listening a lot to like personal development, more self-help books. I love the neuroscience and all that kind of stuff. So I was really leaning into that world. And I had kind of taken a step back from my fantasy love for quite some time, really. But after we got married, I suddenly had all this free time. And my husband and I were laying out by the pool, and I was scrolling through Everend, which is an online app that you can listen to audiobooks on. I highly recommend it. Not sponsored by them. They are just a great, great, great app. And I found this book called A Court of Thorns and Roses. And I was like, I feel like I've heard of this. I was not on Book Talk, I should also say. I was not even remotely close to being a book girly by any means. And I was like, why not? Like, let me just try it out. And Morgan, it took over my life. Like in a way where I was like, I couldn't concentrate on work. I would end my days as early as possible so I could listen and color and just be immersed in these worlds. And it was the best gift. And my husband even said to me, he's like, you've come alive in a way I have never seen you in this way. And it's like, you just shackled yourself to me for the rest of life. And I came alive in a way that is so different and unique. But like, he loved it. And so through that connection with him, I would start talking to him about these books and like 45-minute one-sided conversations where I'm just telling him everything that's happening in my books. And he one day was like, why don't you start a podcast? Like you have this other one, like, why don't you start a podcast about this? And I was like, no, absolutely not. No way. I don't want to do another podcast alone. Doing a solo show is hard. I mean, it's a lot of work, and I've been doing it for 5 years. And I was like, I don't want to do another one, especially the way I'd want to do these types of shows. I wanted it to be very chapter by chapter breakdowns. And that was just way too much. And so a few months later, I get my sister hooked into these books, and she starts coming alive in this way that she hasn't in a long time. She's a mom of 2 teeny tiny little bitty kids. And so she was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm me again for the first time since my kids were born. And so we start exchanging like 100 or so texts a day. And we talked a lot prior to this, but we became like we were already best friends, but we were best friends when we started getting these books in our lives. And finally, one day she was like, why don't we start a podcast? And I was like, it won't leave me alone. And after some convincing, I'll say, I was not about it at first, but after some convincing, we were like, sure, why not? So we were originally going to start with deep diving ACOTAR, but then I just read Fourth Wing. I was obsessed with it. I told my sister, you need to read it. She was like, I don't want to leave this world. Can we switch to Fourth Wing? And we had already recorded 2 episodes of Fantasy Fangirls under ACOTAR. So we had to re-record. We scrapped everything. Basically, those 2 episodes will never see the light of day. We have people begging us for them. They will never see the light of day.
Patreon feature.
You and so many people, but we'll see. They were recorded on a different platform. The audio quality is not quite what I would want to put out as a creator, but we started recording Fourth Wing episodes. We do our big deep dives, and in preparation to launch the show, and we were like, if we get 20 downloads the first week, we'll be so excited. It'll be amazing. And as a result of putting the show out there on TikTok, putting clips and stuff like that, we started going viral. And we were like, oh my God. So before the show had even launched, people were like, when can we hear this? I'm so excited. Da, 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 da. And finally, when we launched the show, I think the first day we were at like 500 downloads, and the first week we were at 5,000. And my sister and I were like, I have a video of me running out of my office, hitting the ground and just weeping at 250 downloads. And my husband has that video. But it was this wild experience that just doesn't really happen. Like, I mean, that is, when you're in the podcast world, you know, average numbers and all this kind of stuff. But this was something that was like, oh my God, this is beyond my wildest dreams. And it just kept going from there, especially with the popularity of Fourth Wing, with the release of Iron Flame, the sequel. It didn't stop. And we're now with a talent agency. We're now with a network. We're now making this our full-time jobs very soon. And that alone is just the greatest gift we could have ever, I don't even want to say imagined, because we didn't imagine this. This was a hobby. And apparently we just don't know how to hobby very well. So here we are. But it has been the greatest gift for sure.
Oh my gosh. I have the chills with that story. And it's so amazing. And I think what's so wonderful is that you're able to fully dive into something that you love and be yourself. And, you know, I keep seeing these posts about people saying reading books and getting into this world has helped them so much more than self-help books. And I think it's true because you're accessing that creative, like, story side of yourself.
I heard it sound, I think it was on TikTok or Instagram, one of the two, but it was like, my life significantly changed for the better when I stopped reading self-help and I started reading smut. And I was like, I feel seen. I feel so seen. Like, and this is, I grew up in the personal development world. Both my parents worked for some of the top dogs. Like, Lexi and I lived this for a long time. And yet here we are in this fantasy world, and I have never felt more like me. My friends even are saying, they're like, this is like, it's you on steroids right now, like, in the best way. And that is a gift that I truly think this fandom has given me. And I'm trying not to tear up when I say that, but I truly do mean it. This has just become my dream job I never knew I had.
I don't even have words, because it's just how powerful that is. That is so wonderful. I'm so glad.
You know what? I'll actually even go a step further, because my husband reminded me of this actually on New Year's Eve. We were talking about this past year and what all has happened and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, do you remember a few weeks before you started Fantasy Fangirls, you were at a podcast conference? And I was like, oh my God, you're so right. So I went to this mega podcast conference in Denver. It just happened to be in Denver this year. And I was there, and day one, it was all these like hot shots on stages talking about, like, if you don't have X amount of downloads, then you're not even a podcaster, and you need to have this much and be considered for sponsorships. And I was discouraged, doesn't even right word. I was on the brink of panic attacks, like, throughout the entire day. And finally I get into the car and I call my sister, and I'm just like, I can't do this. Who do I think I am? Like, why am I doing this world? Like, I just have been here for so long and nothing to show for it. And I was just beating myself up to oblivion. And she was like, Nicole, you're laying the foundation for something. And it was the fact that it was coming from her is just even more chilling. But she's like, you're laying the foundation for something. We just don't know what it is yet.
Oh, yes.
And the irony is now with Fantasy Fangirls, all those there was all, dudes on stages saying this, and all those hotshot dudes, we've now blown all of their numbers out of the water. So it's like, it's a little bit of a fuck you.
Oh my gosh,
it's
yes.
Really satisfying.
Love it.
But the fact that was just a few weeks before, and both my sister and my husband both were saying this is the foundation for something. So actually the next day I went back to that conference and I went to very different types of sessions. And after every single one, all the speakers, I went up to them and I talked to them, and I ended up getting a lot of really good advice. And several of them I actually had on my show, and just my other show, I should say. And the way that works, a lot of people are asking us, how do you start a podcast? How do you start a podcast? And I'm just like, to be honest, I've been doing this for 5 years. So we didn't just start and Fantasy Fangirls happened. We had foundations from Lexi as a PR and marketing expertise in the corporate world. From me as being an entrepreneur, we had this foundation that when it came together, it was ready. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's amazing. It reminds me a little bit about my journey to start this show. I remember this time last year, one of my business coaches was saying, you like she's heard me on a few podcasts as a guest, as a therapist. And she said, you should really do your own podcast. And I said, no, never, ever happening. That doesn't sound fun. I don't want to do it. And then when the idea for this came to mind, I was like, wait a second, maybe I could do this. And I remember emailing you because I was like, but is it a good idea? And getting that reassurance. If I didn't get that reassurance from you, I probably would have never done this, because I was like, do people really want to hear me talking to other people about nerdy stuff?
Yes. Yes, they do. Like, nerds love community.
Yes.
They love community, and you and I both are examples of this, because we love our nerd community. And when you came to me with this idea, and it was like, well, also you have a very good like podcast voice.
Thank
like
you.
That sounds very strange to say, but like you just have a very good podcast voice. And there's so many people who have these ideas for shows and then they never act on them, and it breaks my heart. And for you to come to me and be like, I'm ready, let's do this, I was like, yes. Like, let's go. Made me so happy.
Thank you. What has it been like for you to actually be able to talk about these books and have a fandom talk back to you? Like, you're not just screaming into the void, but you actually get to have conversations.
Sometimes I have to pretend like I'm screaming into the void. I'm not going to lie. Like, sometimes, especially like rated R moment for a second. But in our last episode that just released, I went into a analysis of a blowjob, let's put it just frankly. And I needed to totally disassociate that I was talking to people, and like that would just not even comprehend. And there's certain elements where it just feels like I'm talking to my sister. But when the episodes go live and we get messages from people, like for instance, in season 1, when we were covering Fourth Wing, I had a letter to Smut. It was a love letter to Smut, because it has truly changed my life. And I don't say that in a saucy way. I mean that in a very literal way. And I did a short love letter to Smut, and the amount of responses we got from women who felt so seen by that was just, it brought tears to my eyes. Like Lexi and I were sharing screenshots back and forth, just like crying into our text messages with each other of just pure joy, gratitude. I don't know how else to say it, but the messages about like, you make me laugh, you're my favorite part of my day to listen to, it means so much. And then also to get theories from people and, oh my God, that's so good. So we put them in the episodes, and like, it feels like it's the best friends I never knew I had. And then to hear that come back from people to also say like, you feel like the sisters are the best friends that I never knew I had. It just feels like there's so much love. I don't know, like it sounds so cheesy to say it out loud, but I really do mean it. Like there's just so much love around this community. And especially now with our Discord channel, like that, just to be able to talk to people one-on-one and in that setting, it's just so cool. And to have them also just talk to Lexi and I, like we're fans of the stuff too, is just so special. Because that's what we are. We are all just fans of this work, of this genre, and that to be able to just talk about it like we're all friends is such a cool gift. Yeah. Like I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, and people are saying that Fourth Wing and the Empyrean series is kind of the next Harry Potter. And then some people, debate that, but I view it less about the work itself, and I almost feel like it's more the next fandom, like the next big community where you could have these midnight release parties, you can connect with people. Because it really feels to me that fandoms become more about the community rather than the work itself. The work is almost like the catalyst to bring a fandom together.
Slap that on a t-shirt, Morgan. That was a good sentence you just said. I love that. I agree completely. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying it's the next Harry Potter, because with Harry Potter, you could talk to any average Joe on the street and be like, have you heard of Harry Potter? And they'd be like, yes, of course I have. With Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, you can do that, and it's kind of a 60-40 shot in the dark, if they've heard of it or not. But the people who have heard of it, I feel like there is that Harry Potter-esque community around it. So I feel like it's the niche Harry Potter. But the fact that it has, I think that thanks to social media, I think is a huge part of it. And I think Rebecca Yarros, the author, has even mentioned this as well. The reason it's blown up so much is because of things like Book Talk and Bookstagram that just started talking about this book, and then people kept on talking about it. Like you now can't scroll more than 5 TikToks without seeing that freaking gold cover. It's everywhere. And that, I think, because of social media and what that has done for this particular fandom, I think has been huge. I also think that the story itself is something I think some people will disagree with me on this, but I truly feel like it's very unique. Yes, the story itself with dragons, and it feels very like How to Train Your Dragon meets Harry Potter meets A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I think is not a bad thing. I think those are 3 great fandoms to marry together. But the fact that there's heavy representation. I mean, the female main character has a chronic illness. That I've never seen that personally. And now I've not read every book in this genre, so I'm sure it also exists. But in something that's popular, I don't really see it very often. There's a person of color main male character. There's bisexual characters. There's people who use they, them pronouns. There is so much effing representation. There's someone who signs. They don't verbalize or don't speak verbally. Like that. And it's not said in this world and they're bisexual. Like it's just a state of fact. And I think that's another reason. This society, the foundation was ready for a book like this. And so I think that that's another huge reason why this book has taken off so much. And it just brings me so much joy, because I was so ready for a book like this and I didn't even know it.
Yeah, me too. I remember I was in a coffee shop visiting my niece in Nashville, and I was just waiting for her while she was working, and I took out the book, and page 1, I was hooked. And I cannot remember the last time I felt that way. And then getting back into the book world and the book fandom, it's just been amazing. And I love how there's less shame. Like, you know, I'm thinking with all these episodes, I'm going to bring in some props, because why not? My husband got me this candle a few weeks ago, and I was just like, this is one of my props for the episode today.
Okay, it says smut book energy, and I need the link. I need that link.
And it smells really good too, by the way. So I was like,
as it should. Oh my God, that's amazing.
So speaking of the fandom, how would you analyze this fandom? What would you say this fandom is like? What sort of person would fit in this fandom?
Someone who loves, I'll throw it back to if that fantasy, but not the high fantasy. I think that's really important. This book was written as an introduction to fantasy for people who don't fantasy, which I think has done. So many people have gotten into this genre through Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. So who is this book for? I think it's for people who are very contemporary. They like the contemporary speak. They like contemporary language. They don't mind a little R-rated language, as well as some R-rated smut as well. I think it's for people who are really exploring that romantic reading, but don't want something that's just like every other page is graphic. You know, there is very specific sex scenes, but I think they're never at the cost of the story, which I think a lot of people really appreciate, myself included. This is really a genre for people who are like, I've heard so much about this freaking fantasy world, but I don't want to start with Lord of the Rings. If you want a book that every character has a very different name and not like Eric and Auric, like there's two, like in oh my God, what book series is that? Not How to Train Your Dragon, House of Fire, not House of Fire and Blood. Crap, House of the Dragon. What's that book series called? Fire and Blood. There we go. That's not like George R.R. Martin Fire and Blood, where 2 characters are named Eric and Auric, and yes, they're spelled almost identically, and it is 2 different characters. Like, if you want something that is really easy to follow, it's very contemporary. It's an easy read. I don't think that anything is very difficult to comprehend like it would be in more of those high fantasy genres. That is what this book series is for. I also think for people who are fans of Harry Potter, for people who were fans of Twilight, but haven't got, like you and I have been saying, but haven't gotten back into that reading, but have always kind of wondered like, I wonder if anything's ever going to feel that same way. I do think that this would fill that void for sure. So that would be my answer. That's my answer.
I would also say that if you're somebody who misses the midnight release parties that the Harry Potter series used to have, then this is definitely the fandom for you to get into, because I believe there's going to be 3 more books. So 3 more midnight release parties. I remember a few years ago, I was saying to my sisters, I really, really miss those midnight release parties. They're so much fun. They become almost like a ritual. And I don't know if anything will ever have that again. And they're back.
Yeah. Did you go to one for Iron Flame?
Gosh, I'm so embarrassed to say no, because I didn't read the book yet.
It's okay. That's okay. That's totally okay. A lot of people didn't get into Fourth Wing until after the hoopla of Iron Flame.
Yeah.
Like, you are not in the major minority there by any means. I'm so excited because she just started working on Empyrean book 3. And so I'm really hoping end of next year, we're going to get the 3rd book and to see that midnight release party. Because I feel like it's just going to be like this year, but even bigger.
Yeah. I remember seeing all the posts afterwards. So I had Fourth Wing. I didn't start reading it yet. And I knew there was a midnight release party. And I was like, well, I can't go to it because I don't want to get spoiled. And then afterwards, I was like, no, why did I wish I read it. I love midnight release parties. What was I thinking? So now if anything ever has a midnight release party, I'm reading it. I'm going because I'd rather go and think it was a waste of time than not go and miss out, because midnight release parties really were such a special part of my upbringing, childhood, life.
I agree. Like, I didn't even read the Harry Potter books until much later in my life, and I still went to midnight release, definitely 6 and 7, and then obviously Cursed Child as well. I thought that with just watching the movies, I'd be good to read book 7. I wasn't until years later that I was like, oh man, I really wish I had read these books fully when I was younger, because I feel like that midnight release would have been just so much sweeter.
Yeah. I
think that there's definitely the spoiler, and this is something we had to be really mindful with Iron and Flame's release, and I want to do very similar with House of Flame and Shadow with Crescent City number 3 release coming out. We logged off of social media for about 24 hours. Like, we flew through the book. I took the day off work. I read all through the night. It was my first all-nighter I've ever done in my entire life. I'm almost 30, which says something about my college career. But anyway, we're really adamant about, we do not want to be the people who spoil it for others. So we did a reactions episode where the first half of or say even like the first third of the episode was totally spoiler free. And then we didn't start posting about spoilers until several days even after that, when most people had finished the book. Obviously there were some outliers, but we were really adamant about spoiler warnings. But there were some people who weren't, and they just said the very, 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 very big cliffhanger that ends Iron Flame. We're just like putting it out there. And we had some people reach out to us devastated because they got spoiled from this book that they just love so much. They got the ending spoiled to them, and it really hurts my heart. So if any content creators are listening to this, please, we still put Iron Flame spoilers and Fourth Wing spoilers on all of our content, unless we forget, because we're humans, but we try to put it on everything, because it really does mean a lot to people to be able to see, oh, Iron Flame spoilers, scroll away. That, I think, is just that extra little touch that takes 2 seconds that a lot of people don't think about, especially now that Iron Flame has been out for a while. We still have people who haven't finished it. That's fine. Like, that's totally fine. Some people didn't find it until later. Some people don't have time to sit down and read it all in one sitting. That's totally fair. And so we want to be always really, really mindful of it. And we want to really encourage other people to do that too, because the internet can be a scary place right after big things release.
Yeah. So. And it's so magical to be able to experience something for the first time.
Yes. Do you ever have those books that you wish you could just like get a full-blown lobotomy to read it again?
Yes.
Like Mist and Fury, if I could do that, would be 100% a quarter Mist and Fury. 100%.
Yeah. That's how I feel about books, movies, shows, everything all the time. But you know, one of the amazing things about this fandom, which I think somebody would be a good fit for this fandom if they are ready to dive into theories and not know everything about a series right now, like to have that fun discussion.
Yes. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I didn't realize the series wasn't finished when they started Fourth Wing, and now they're pissed about it.
What?
And for me, it's like, they want to know the ending. They don't like being in limbo, and I totally get that. But I'm also like trying to figure out what's going to happen. And we hear and come up with some unhinged theories that are now just jokes on the podcast. Like, I have a thing about Second Wing that I will die on the hill for that theory that I know is probably not true, but I will die on the hill for that unhinged theory. And there's so much around the theorizing, and I think that especially when Iron Flame released and the lead up to it, that people just, it was their outlet. They needed to talk about it with people, and social media was that outlet to be able to scroll and see theories and think about this book in a new way, and have people like Lexi and I who analyze it really, 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 really thoroughly, to have that fandom that looks through every single line and asks, what could this also mean? I haven't seen that since Harry Potter. That is for sure.
Me too. And I think there's just something to be said about really enjoying the process rather than just trying to get to the end, because what's the point if we're just trying to get to the end and not really enjoying the moment?
Man, how fucking poetic was that? That's so true.
Well, thank you. I know I'm just coming up with all these one-liners. It's because I've been obsessing over this podcast for the past 2 months trying to plan it.
Yeah. Oh, that makes me so happy. You're doing great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How would you say this fandom has changed your life?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I'm going to go with Romantasy as a whole, and then maybe I'll niche down to the Empyrean series. But the Romantasy as a whole, it has changed my life in both the way I now experience books. I don't have and this shocks a lot of people when they hear this. I don't have a whole lot going on upstairs when I'm reading for the first time. I'm being dragged along with the author on this process. I don't think about double meanings. I don't think about what could happen or try to figure it out. Like, I just enjoy reading it. And when I started, especially with ACOTAR, when I started scrolling through Book Talk and Bookstagram, because that's when I started getting into that world, seeing people looking at it in multiple ways, and especially the Maas-verse as a whole, and seeing what could this also mean in Throne of Glass and also Crescent City. And for those of you who don't know, it's all this big multiverse, a 17 book series, basically.
Wait,
which is
17?
I think it's 15 or 17.
Is there a list of the order that we should be reading this in?
So I have my own personal answer, and everyone has I won't say everyone, but some people have some very spicy takes. I'll say my personal recommendation is to start with the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. I think it is the easiest, most accessible to get into. It's pretty heavier on the romance than it is the fantasy. It is a very good intro series to this world. So that is A Court of Thorns and Roses, Court of Mist and Fury, Court of Wings and Ruin, A Court of Frost and Starlight, and A Court of Silver Flames. And this series is not done, just so people know. Then I would actually go over to Crescent City. I would go over to House of Earth and Blood, and then A House of Sky and Breath, and House of Flame and Shadow comes out on January 30th. The reason is because it is very contemporary. There's email and phones in this world. It was very jarring to read at first because I was coming from Bezgaev, and it was like, you have showers? Like, that's so exciting, you know? So I go there next because it is still very contemporary. And I don't know this because I haven't finished the series yet, but there's people who say you have to read those together, basically, one after the other, because there is a lot of parallels. I'll put it that way. Then I would move over to Throne of Glass because that series is finished and it's 7 books with a prequel. I actually have not even read the prequel yet. And people are like, why? And I'm like, because for me, Throne of Glass was... It was like so hyped for me. And I unfortunately got a lot of it spoiled on social media. And also I started the series when everything with Fantasy Fangirls was happening at first. And I was just not in the world really. So by the time I got to the 7th book, I was like, oh, this is good. But I wasn't in it, you know, I wasn't in the world. But a lot of people say it's their favorite fantasy series of all time. And I totally see why. Like, I don't knock it at all. I think it is a really well done series. I think I was not in the headspace in order to fully immerse myself. So I'm really looking forward to rereading it and reading the prequel in there as well. So that's the order I would go in the Maas-verse.
Perfect. Right. Because I know the next book you're covering is ACOTAR, and you said to read all 5 books. So they are on my list so I could listen to your show.
That makes me so happy. Yes, definitely. The way Lexi and I show works is we are talking everything on the table from episode 1 because we do foreshadowing. We talk about the theories that can tie in books. You know, for ACOTAR, there's something that I'm going to cover in episode 1 that also covers things that happen in book 2, book 3, and book 5. I can't talk about what happens in episode 1 without talking about those future books. And so that's just kind of how we go. There's some people who don't like that format, but we're just not the show for them, and that's totally fine. But yes, definitely, if you are wanting to follow us into A Court of Thorns and Roses, please read all 5 books before starting because we don't want to spoil anything for you.
What would be different in your life if not for Romantasy?
I'm going to get vulnerable for a second because I'm working on that. I'm a Capricorn. I don't like to take my walls down very often. Before Romantasy, I was kind of just stuck. I don't know how else to put it. I was really obsessed with where I was going and didn't feel connected to the outcome as much as I had in previous years. And there were many, many reasons for that. And there were things that I was disagreeing with in the profession that I was in. And not specifically with how my approach was to it, but more so the general approach that a lot of people were taking in my field. I didn't like it. I didn't agree with it. When I started reading ACOTAR, it was like I just didn't... I'm trying to think of how to say this without sounding cheesy.
Please sound cheesy. I love cheesy.
I'm going to cheese it. I'm going to cheese it up. It was like I was taking a full breath for the first time in years. Here's how I can put it best. Prior to Romantasy, I felt like I was always living in the future. I was always trying to get there. I was trying to get there as fast as possible. I very much was a high achiever perfectionist. And I think definitely Fantasy Fangirls has brought out a very different side of perfection for me, but that's a different topic. But I was always just so future focused. And with everything with Romantasy, with Fantasy Fangirls specifically, I have never felt so in my present life. And not only just grateful for it because of everything that's happening, but also just because there is so much going on right now that I never thought would happen to me. And I mean that both living in these worlds and living in the real world. And I was saying to my husband, like, I normally make this big old list of New Year's goals, and we're recording this on January 2nd, so it's very fresh. But I was saying to him, I was like, this is the first year that I haven't wanted to create goals because I'm so enjoying right now. I don't even know what's going to happen 2 months from now, and I don't care. I don't, not that I don't care like blasé, like I don't care not knowing things. And that's new for me. That's new. Yeah. Like I am normally a very high certainty person, very type A, but I'm just really enjoying that for the first time in my life. And that was all because of starting to get into these worlds and immerse myself. Like I said earlier, I was ending my days earlier. I was trying to spend as much time in these romantic books as much as possible. That was the beginning of living in the present moment for me, which is so ironic because sure, you're present, but you're also living in this whole other dreamland. But it made my real world more heightened.
Yes.
Like, I'll say this very bluntly. Smut has changed my relationship with my husband. I said this on the podcast, but I think that specifically, not just with women, but I'm going to talk to women specifically because I do see it most prominently with us. Like there is this, we're not expected to constantly be ready to roll. We're not constantly expected to be rip-roaring and horny. But living in these worlds and experiencing someone's head that, no pun intended on that one, but like being in someone else's mind and being in someone's mind whose sex is a very important part of their life. It makes it so that it reminds me that, it's allowed to be very important in my life too. It doesn't have to be the bottom of the to-do list. It can be right there at the top. And that has been so special to me. I don't even have the words to describe how special that has been to me. And it's been very special to a lot of listeners as well when I brought it up on the show. So I think that was an unexpected, wildly unexpected plus of diving into these worlds. Like it has made me feel closer to my husband, not only physically, but romantically as well, because he's read these books now. Like he knows different aspects of things that make me really happy. And he's doing so good. He's taking notes and it's so good. It's so good. I think it's been present moment, and my relationships with those around me has been huge. Obviously my relationship with Lexi, but that I hope that just goes without saying. Like she is the person who is my other half in every single way, and being closer to her is just mind blowing how much this has changed our relationship as well.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing all of that, because I think a lot of people can really relate. And I think there is so much shame just about existing as a human. And I think these books allow us to be who we are. A lot of people say, you're just escaping by reading books or watching movies, but I don't think that's true. I think it's allowing you to access another part of yourself and to be creative and to think through things. And like you're saying, have a much more enriching life.
Yes. Enriching life is the perfect way to put it. And like, there's a reason that when a character we love dies, it's like a person in our life has died. I think that especially people who aren't obsessed with the nerddom as a whole, I'm going to really go broad on this one. They don't really get why these things are so important to us when this is someone we've never met or it's not even real. but they're so real to us. There's that Harry Potter quote. Of course it's happening inside your head, but why on earth should that mean it is not real? And that quote, I'm about to actually get that tattooed on my body. That quote is so special to me, which is, I think just the reason why this world is so important. Like, yes, of course it is happening inside our heads, but there are some things in Romantasy that feel more real to me than aspects of my reality life. And I think that's important. It's a way to not only get through the hard times, but it's also a way, because we have a lot of people who reach out to us who are going through unimaginable hardships, and diving into these worlds is their escape. It's their way of coping.
Yeah.
And that's not nothing. That's not nothing. But it's not only for people who are going through hard times. You could be the happiest in the world and dive into these books and still enjoy them. I think that it's the broadening our minds in ways that are so fantastical that I would never have thought of a dragon school. That's just not even something that I would have processed. But thanks to Rebecca Yarros, it now takes up 99% of my brain space, Like, that's just so special.
It's true. And I think these stories are so powerful. I shared in my intro episode that a few months ago, I experienced a loss in my life, and I was able to cope with that and work through it, majorly in part because not just diving into books, but also joining book clubs and finding a community of other people who had that depth of thought as well and were able to think through things. And entering this world is life-changing.
It is. I'm so happy you're exploring it.
I'm so happy you're here. So, Nicole, what does being a nerd mean to you?
What does being a nerd mean to me? I'm actually going to pull something you said earlier. It means enriching my life in a deeper way.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people think of nerds as that. I think it's very like, oh, you're dressing up and you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, which, by the way, Dungeons and Dragons is awesome. Mm-hmm. I'm in my first D&D campaign and I love it. But I'm not good. I'm not good at it. But I think that being a nerd means you have this whole other depth that the people, it's like, if you know, you know. It's this whole other depth to us that is this ability to feel and care and explore and imagine that a lot of people don't respect or honor unless they're in the nerddom. So being a nerd to me is that, and it's also being buddies and best friends with a lot of people around the world who may not even know you exist yet. Like it's going out in the world wearing a Best Guy t-shirt and someone being like, oh my God, and immediately connecting with them on such a deep level. That is what being a nerd to me means.
Oh, that connection and bonding. I love it. And just that passion and enriching your life. Yes.
Absolutely.
So before we wrap up with our geeky recommendations, do you have any thoughts that you want to share with our listeners?
There's been a few times in my life where something has dropped into my head and I can't get it out of my head. And when my husband brought up the podcast, that was definitely one of them. I tried, Morgan. I tried so hard to ignore it, to say, no, it's just not for me. But then especially when Lexi brought it up, it was like, oh my God, yes. And there's been a few other moments, starting my perfectionism, that's whole business. There's something right now that's not getting out of my head and it scares the absolute fuck out of me, but I don't feel comfortable saying it out loud quite yet in front of people. But I would really recommend for people who have those little ideas that aren't so little, let's be real, to explore them. Yes. Why? It's kind of that whole why not? And if I hadn't done that, my life wouldn't have changed this way. And it's changing so much to the point where everything I ever wanted and didn't know I wanted is happening. And I don't have words for that, how grateful I am for that and how much I don't take what's happening for granted. Mm-hmm. But that wouldn't have happened if if Lexi hadn't dragged me kicking and screaming into this, but like it wouldn't have happened if that little idea in my head hadn't been explored. And I think especially nerds, especially fans, like we have these ideas more often than the average Joes because we are so enriched, because we do have so many more depths and levels and imagines and all these different ideas. They come to us so much more frequent. And I don't mean frequent like regularly. I think they like frequent as a whole fandom. And I would just strongly recommend for people, you have no idea what happens if you take that leap.
Yes.
You have no idea.
Don't let the fear of failure stop you.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling myself every day as I'm planning for the podcast. So
yep. It doesn't go away for a while. I still have that when we hop on recordings. I'm like, oh my God. Like we're recording a very, 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 very highly amped scene next episode, and I'm like avoiding doing the outline for it. I'm terrified. It's the throne scene for those who know.
Ooh,
but like I'm just like
can't wait.
I'm terrified to do that episode because it's so meaningful to people, and I want to do it justice, you know. So that still happens. It still happens.
Yes. So to wrap up, I want to give everybody just a fun recommendation to embrace your nerdiness. I want to recommend either joining or finding an in-person book club so you could connect with others. I found mine through this website called bookclubs.com, and it has been life-changing for me. And so I recommend checking out the website, seeing if you have any book clubs near you. They also do have virtual ones, but definitely recommend checking it out and starting your own, even if you don't have one near you.
You said it's called bookclubs.com?
Yep, bookclubs.com. And I'm not an affiliate. I don't get any money for sharing this. I just know it's been life-changing for me, and I want to share it with everybody.
I'm immediately checking that out after this recording. Yes, I hope you know that.
What do you have to recommend?
I'm going to recommend this as a fan, not as a creator in this space. And that is truly check out Fourth Wing, check out Iron Flame, not in that order, very specifically do Fourth Wing, then Iron Flame, please, or else you'd be like, what the hell's going on? But that book series is so fun. And if you enjoy it, I strongly recommend checking out Sarah J. Maas. I strongly recommend checking out Jennifer L. Armentrout. She wrote the From Blood and Ash series, which had me in a chokehold for a while before we had her on the show. There's so much worlds around this, but I think especially Fourth Wing and Iron Flame are such a good gateway drug getting into it. So I strongly recommend checking it out. And the audiobooks are fantastic. I think Rebecca Soler does a really good job of narrating Violet. There was just recently the dramatized adaptation, part 1 released, which is basically like a movie, but just in audio. So it's got different characters as a cast. It's got sound effects, music, all that kind of stuff. So I would strongly recommend checking out those. I haven't fully listened to it yet, but I've heard clips, and the cast is incredibly amazing. They've worked so hard on it. So I'm really excited to listen to that for Fourth Wing.
Ooh, that sounds really fun. So I'm the type of person that later today, after we stop recording, I'm going to think, man, I wish I said this to her. Man, I wish I asked this question. So if anybody else out there can relate, just know that that's what I'm experiencing. And I probably will experience that every episode. But one thing that I will be so upset that I don't share is just really thank you so much just for being so supportive of me and this podcast. Even before any of this nerdy stuff, you were supportive of the other stuff we were doing. You've just been, like I said, so inspiring, and you're so genuine and you're so kind. And I am so happy that with all of your success, your podcast is so good. And I'm very picky with podcasts. That's why I also didn't want to start this one, because it's like, I don't know if I could meet my own standards, but your show is so good. And thank you for being here. It means so much to me. I don't think I could even express how much it means to me, but thank you.
You're gonna have me crying, Morgan. You know those moments where you just wish you could like sound clip and just like on those bad days, you could just replay that, like that little moment. This is that moment for me. Just thank you for everything you said. And that means the world to me. That's always my goal, is to lift others up especially when they have these mind-blowingly good ideas like you do. And it's just, I'm so honored to be in your circle. I mean that.
Thank you. I'm so happy I found you on the internet when I was Googling perfectionism coaches.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you for sliding into my
And then you
box.
responded, and I was just like, oh my gosh, she actually responded. This is so cool. Yeah.
I like to respond to everything, at least as much as possible. It's hard now.
Oh, I bet your inbox is flooded.
My inbox is a terrifying place. I'll tell you that. It's a terrifying place.
So where can people find you?
We are everywhere at Fantasy Fangirls Pod, mainly on TikTok and Instagram. That just tends to be where the party is. We do a lot of behind the scenes stuff for the podcast on Instagram, so definitely check that out. And then the show is Fantasy Fangirls. You can find us literally anywhere you listen to podcasts, including YouTube. A lot of people like watching the shows because apparently we're very expressive. I went to theater college for that, so I'm glad it's coming across and using it in some way. But we're on YouTube at Fantasy Fangirls as well.
Amazing. Everybody definitely check out the show. It is so good, especially as you're read the books first and then listen, but so good.
Thank you. If you've only read Fourth Wing, you can listen to the Fourth Wing season. We hadn't read Iron Flame at that time, so it is a safe, spoiler-free place for Iron Flame. So if you've read Fourth Wing, that's very important. That is a safe place to be.
Awesome. All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening. It would mean so much to me if you are able to rate and review the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. As Nicole, I'm sure you know, ratings and reviews mean a lot when it comes to getting a podcast started. So please do that if you are able to.
It takes 2 seconds. I'm gonna echo this on Morgan's behalf. Please, for the love of God, it takes 2 seconds. It really does help the show, especially getting the word out. So
thank you.
I'm echoing.
Thank you. And if you have any thoughts about the show, or if you have any ideas for things you want me to talk about, or really just anything at all, feel free to email me at thatnerdthingpod@gmail.com. I just started a new Instagram and TikTok account, so please follow the show. The account name is thatnerdthingpod. And again, Nicole, thank you so much for being here. It means so much. And I guess that's a wrap on episode 1 of That Nerd Thing. See everyone next time.
Go. Okay, congratulations.
Bye.